My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life, I believe people revealed themselves in big moments. A betrayal, a confession, a slammed door, a late-night phone call that changed everything. But I was wrong. Sometimes people reveal themselves in a room full of strangers, while everyone else is laughing, while the question sounds harmless, while the person beside you thinks you are not listening closely enough to understand what they just admitted. That was how it started with Mason. Not with another woman in our bed, not with lipstick on his collar, not with some dramatic message flashing across his phone at midnight. It started with a question. We were sitting in a packed lecture hall downtown, the kind of event Mason loved because it made him feel smarter than everyone else. He had invited me at the last minute, almost like an afterthought. "You'll like it," he said. "It's about moral choices." I should have paid attention to the way he smiled when he said that. The room was warm, crowded, and buzzing with people who looked like they had come prepared to argue. Mason sat beside me in a dark blazer, relaxed and confident, his hand resting on the back of my chair instead of my shoulder. Across the aisle sat Vanessa, his ex-girlfriend. She looked surprised to see me, but not uncomfortable. That was the first thing I noticed. Most women would look away, smile awkwardly, pretend they hadn't seen you. Vanessa didn't. She lifted her fingers in a small wave, then looked at Mason. Not at us, at him. Mason leaned forward and smiled back. "Did you know she was coming?" I asked quietly. He didn't even turn his head fully. "It's a public lecture, Clara." That was his first warning shot. Calm voice, reasonable face, just enough irritation to make me feel like I had asked something embarrassing. So I stayed quiet. The professor began with a story about a trolley car racing down a track. 5 workers stood ahead. The brakes didn't work, but there was a side track with 1 worker on it. If you turned the wheel, 1 person died and 5 lived. The question was simple. What would you do? Most people raised their hands to turn the trolley. Mason raised his hand immediately. Vanessa did too. I didn't. Mason glanced at me, amused. "You wouldn't turn?" he whispered. "I don't know." He gave a soft laugh through his nose. "That's not an answer." "It is if I'm not sure." He leaned closer, still smiling, but his voice dropped. "Clara, sometimes 1 person has to be sacrificed so the bigger thing survives." I looked at him then, not because of the answer, because of how easily he said it. Like he had practiced that sentence somewhere else. Like he had already decided who counted as the bigger thing. The professor moved to another version of the question. This time, you weren't driving the trolley. You were standing on a bridge. A large man stood beside you. If you pushed him, he would fall onto the track, die, and stop the trolley from killing 5 people. Almost no one raised their hand. Mason didn't either. But Vanessa did. A few people laughed nervously. Someone behind us whispered, "Wow." Vanessa shrugged. "What?" she said, loud enough for our row to hear. "If the math works, the math works." Mason smiled. I felt something small and cold settle in my chest. After the lecture, people gathered in the lobby, still debating morality like it was a game. Mason was in his element. He loved rooms where people used complicated words to excuse simple cruelty. Vanessa joined us near the coffee table. "Clara," she said brightly, like we were old friends, "you were very quiet in there." I was listening. "To the ethics?" she asked. "To people." Her smile twitched. Mason laughed too quickly. "Clara gets intense about these things." I turned to him. "I didn't say anything intense." "No," he said, still smiling. "That's kind of the point." Vanessa looked between us, amused. Then Mason said something I should have walked away from right then. "She's sweet," he told Vanessa, "but she thinks every choice has to feel good to be right." Vanessa laughed, and I stood there, holding a paper cup of coffee I didn't even want, while my boyfriend explained me to his ex-girlfriend like I was a soft, sentimental problem. I could have confronted him. I could have asked why he invited me if he planned to talk over me. But instead, I watched him. The way he angled his body toward Vanessa, the way his voice warmed when she challenged him, the way he called her brutal, like it was a compliment. And then I noticed his phone. It lit up in his hand. A message preview from Vanessa. She really didn't catch the point, did she? Mason saw me see it. For 1 second, his face changed. Then he locked the screen and smiled. "It's just a joke," he said. I hadn't said a word yet. That was how I knew it wasn't. That night should have ended there. An awkward lecture, a strange conversation, a message I wasn't supposed to see. Something small, forgettable. That's what I told myself on the way home. Mason drove like nothing had happened, one hand on the wheel, the other casually tapping the steering wheel to music only he seemed to hear. "You went quiet," he said after a while. I was thinking. "About what?" I turned to look at him. "The message." He didn't react immediately, just kept driving. "What message?" "From Vanessa." A pause, then a sigh, like I had just created a problem out of nothing. "Clara." "It was a joke." "You didn't deny it." "Because there's nothing to deny." He finally glanced at me, half smiling. "You're overthinking it." That word again, overthinking. It was always the same pattern. Something felt wrong, I asked. He minimized it, and somehow I ended up doubting myself. But this time, something didn't settle. "Why would she say I didn't catch the point?" I asked. Mason shrugged. "Because you didn't answer the question." "That's not the same thing." "It kind of is." His tone stayed light, but there was a sharp edge underneath it. "Clara, not everything needs to be emotional. It was a thought experiment." I looked out the window. Streetlights passed in slow flashes across the glass. "I wasn't being emotional," I said quietly. "I just didn't agree." "With what?" "With how easily you said someone should be sacrificed." He laughed softly. "That's literally the point of the scenario." "No," I said. "The point is that it's supposed to be difficult." That made him go quiet, not defensive, not angry, just uninterested, like the conversation had stopped being worth his attention. We didn't talk for the rest of the drive. When we got home, Mason headed straight for the shower. I stood in the kitchen for a while, replaying the evening in my head. Every look, every word, every small moment that didn't feel like a big deal, but added up to something I couldn't ignore anymore. Then his phone buzzed again. On the counter, screen lighting up. Vanessa. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The preview was enough. "You really downgraded. She's too soft for you." My stomach dropped. A second message came in. Or maybe that's the point. Easy to control. The words didn't feel like a joke. They felt practiced. Like this wasn't the first time they had talked about me like that. The bathroom door was still closed. Water running. I picked up my own phone, opened our shared expenses app, scrolled. At first, nothing unusual. Rent, utilities, groceries. Then I noticed something small, a transfer. From Mason's account. Not to me, to a name I recognized. Vanessa. I frowned. Scrolled further. Another transfer. Smaller, but recent. Very recent. My chest tightened. I wasn't supposed to be looking for anything, but now that I was, I couldn't stop. I opened our joint calendar. There were gaps, whole evenings marked as work or meeting, but no details, no locations, just empty blocks of time. The shower turned off. I quickly locked my phone and set it down. Mason walked out a moment later, towel around his neck, relaxed like the night had been completely normal. "Hey," he said, grabbing a glass of water. "You okay?" I looked at him. Really looked this time, at the ease in his face, at the confidence, at the complete absence of concern. And suddenly, the lecture question came back to me. 5 people on one track, one person on the other. Turn the wheel. Don't turn the wheel. I realized something then. Mason didn't hesitate because he had already decided something long before that room. Some people matter more, some people don't. And the real problem wasn't the question. It was that I didn't know which side I was on. The next morning I woke up before him, carefully, like I didn't want to disturb something fragile. But it wasn't the relationship I was protecting anymore. It was the truth. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started checking everything. Not because I was angry, not yet. Because I needed to know. If I was going to be the one left on the track, I needed to see it coming. By morning, I had found enough to know I wasn't imagining things. Not everything, not yet, but enough. There were transfers to Vanessa marked as consulting. There were calendar blocks Mason had labeled as work meetings, even though they lined up with nights he came home smelling like expensive perfume and restaurant smoke. There were receipts from places he had told me he had never been. And then there was the dinner reservation. 4 seats. Mason, his mother, Vanessa, and me. He had not mentioned Vanessa would be there. When I asked him about dinner, he looked up from his phone like I had reminded him of something minor. "Oh, right. Mom wants to see us tonight." "Us?" "Yeah." I waited. He didn't add anything, so I did. "Is Vanessa coming?" His thumb stopped moving for half a second. Then he smiled. "She might stop by. Don't make it weird." That was the sentence that confirmed everything. Not because Vanessa was coming, because somehow in his mind the problem was already me. That evening, I wore a simple black dress, tied my hair back, and brought nothing except my phone and a steady face. Mason seemed pleased with that. He probably thought I had decided to behave. The restaurant was quiet, expensive, and dimly lit, the kind of place where people lowered their voices while saying cruel things. His mother was already there when we arrived. Vanessa was sitting beside her. They looked comfortable, too comfortable. Mason kissed his mother on the cheek, hugged Vanessa for a second too long, then pulled out the chair beside him for me, like he was performing kindness for an audience. His mother smiled at me. "Clara, sweetheart, you look tired." "Not hello, not good to see you, just that." I sat down. "I had an early morning." Vanessa tilted her head. "Checking on things?" Mason laughed under his breath. I looked at her. "Sometimes that helps." For a moment, her smile thinned. Then the waiter came, and Mason ordered wine for the table without asking me if I wanted any. "She'll just have water," he said, nodding toward me. I turned to the waiter. "I'll order for myself, thank you." The table went still, just enough. Mason's jaw tightened. His mother gave a small laugh. "Oh, Clara, we're all friends here." That was the strange thing about public disrespect. People rarely call it disrespect. They call it a joke, a misunderstanding, being sensitive, ruining the mood. Mason leaned close and whispered, "Don't start." I smiled politely. "I haven't." Dinner moved forward, but every sentence felt staged. His mother talked about Mason's future like I was not sitting there. Vanessa mentioned a studio space she was almost ready to secure. Mason nodded along, proud and familiar. Then his mother said, "Mason has always needed someone who understands ambition." Vanessa lowered her eyes, smiling. I set my fork down. Mason noticed. "What?" he asked, scared. "Nothing." "No, say it." He wanted me to react. I could feel it. If I got emotional, he would have proof. Clara was insecure. Clara couldn't handle his past. Clara made everything difficult, so I didn't give him that. I picked up my glass of water and said, "I'm listening." Vanessa leaned back. "That's new." Mason laughed. His mother did too. And there it was. The moment I finally understood the shape of the room. They had not invited me to dinner. They had invited me to be measured, to be compared, to be quietly pushed toward the edge while everyone pretended it was polite conversation. My phone was in my lap, recording. Not for revenge, for accuracy. Because people like Mason were always careful later. They remembered themselves as kinder than they were. They softened their words, removed the smirks, forgot the audience. But my phone wouldn't forget. Then Vanessa said the line that ended whatever softness I still had left. "You know, Clara, some people are just built for complicated men. Some people need simple things." Mason didn't defend me. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He just took a slow sip of wine. So I looked at him and asked quietly, "Is that what I am to you? Simple?" His mother immediately said, "Don't twist her words." But Mason answered, and he answered too easily. "I think you want a version of life that doesn't challenge you." The table went silent. I nodded once, not because I agreed, because I had what I needed. I stood up, placed my napkin beside my plate, and looked at the 3 of them. "Thank you for dinner." Mason frowned. "Clara, sit down." "No." His face changed then, just a little. The control slipped. Vanessa watched me closely, like she was waiting for me to cry. I didn't. I only looked at Mason and said, "I understand now." Then I left the restaurant before dessert arrived. Outside, the night air was cold enough to clear my head. My hands were steady when I opened my phone, saved the recording, and sent a copy to my private email. Then I opened the shared expense folder again. Transfers, receipts, calendar blocks, Vanessa's studio notes. Piece by piece, the story was becoming clear. Mason had not been confused. He had been building a life where I paid for stability, while Vanessa got the dream. And the worst part was not that he betrayed me. The worst part was that he thought I would be too soft to notice. I didn't go home right away. I needed distance before I made my next move. There's a difference between reacting and deciding. That night, I chose to decide. I sat in a quiet cafe across the street, opened my laptop, and laid everything out in front of me. No rushing, no emotion, just facts. The transfers to Vanessa weren't random. They were consistent. Same amount, same notes, same timing. Always right after Mason told me he was tight this month, or asked if I could cover a larger portion of rent. I opened our lease. Both our names were on it. But the deposit? Mine. The last 3 rent payments? Mostly mine. Utilities? Mine. Groceries? Mostly mine. I didn't notice before because I wasn't looking for imbalance. I was looking for partnership. That was my mistake. Then I opened a folder I had almost forgotten about. Shared documents Mason once asked me to help organize. Inside, there was a file labeled Studio Plan V. I clicked. Business proposal, budget breakdown, interior design mock-ups, and at the bottom, funding notes, initial capital, covered, monthly support, secured, no names. But I didn't need names, because I already knew where the money came from. I leaned back in my chair and let the truth settle. Mason wasn't just talking to Vanessa. He wasn't just meeting her. He was investing in her, with money he didn't have, which meant, with money, I was covering for him. I closed my eyes for a second, not to calm down, but to make sure I never blurred the picture again. By the time I got home, Mason was already there, sitting on the couch, waiting. That was new. "You left," he said as I walked in. "Yes." "In the middle of dinner?" "Yes." He stood up. "That was embarrassing, Clara." I set my bag down. "No, it wasn't." His expression hardened. "You made it awkward for everyone." I didn't say anything. "That's exactly the problem," he snapped. "You always do this quiet thing, like you're above it." I looked at him. "No. I do the quiet thing when I'm paying attention." That stopped him for a second. Then he laughed, but there was tension in it now. "Okay, so what? You think there's some big conspiracy here?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked past him, sat down at the table, and opened my laptop again. Mason watched me. "What are you doing?" "Looking." "For what?" "For the full picture." He crossed his arms. "You're being dramatic." I turned the screen toward him. The transfer history, the dates, the amounts. His smile faded. "That doesn't mean anything," he said quickly. "It's just helping a friend." "A friend you meet in secret?" "It's not a secret. It wasn't mentioned." "That's not the same thing." "It is when you live with someone." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated now. "Clara, you're twisting this." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to win the argument. I just opened another file. The studio plan. Scrolled, turned the screen again. "Is this also nothing?" He didn't speak this time. He just stared, long enough for the silence to become the answer. That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't questioning myself. I understood. Mason wasn't confused. He wasn't torn. He wasn't figuring things out. He was balancing 2 lives, one that paid for stability, one that gave him excitement, and he assumed I would stay exactly where I was, on the sidetrack, quiet, reliable, replaceable. "You went through my files," he said finally. "I organized them." "That doesn't give you the right. It does when my money is in them." That hit, harder than anything else I had said. He looked at me differently now, not like I was overreacting, like I was a problem. "You're making this bigger than it is." "No," I said. "I'm making it clear." He stepped closer. "So what now? You're going to punish me?" I shook my head slowly. "No." "Then what?" I closed the laptop, looked straight at him. "I'm going to stop helping you." He frowned. What does that mean? It means next month I'm not covering rent. You don't cover rent. I do. He opened his mouth to argue, stopped, because now he knew I had the numbers. All of it? He asked. Your half is yours. And if I don't have it? I held his gaze. That's not my problem anymore. For the first time since I met him, Mason looked uncertain, just for a second, but it was enough. That night, I didn't cry, pack, or yell. I just made a list. Accounts to separate, subscriptions to cancel, documents to copy, contacts to prepare. Because this wasn't about leaving in anger. This was about leaving correctly. And the most important part, I wasn't going to announce it. I was going to let it unfold, the way real consequences do. The next few days looked normal from the outside. That was the point. I still went to work, still came home, still spoke to Mason in measured sentences. But underneath that calm, everything was shifting. I separated what needed to be separated: bank access, auto payments, subscriptions tied to my card. I didn't delete anything yet. I just moved myself out of the system, one layer at a time. Mason noticed something was off. Not immediately, but slowly. Small things. Did the internet bill go through? He asked one night. You'll need to check, I said. He frowned. You usually handle it. I used to. Another night. Hey, rent's due in a few days. I know. You'll send your part? I already did. And the rest? I looked at him. That's your part. The silence that followed was different this time. Tight. Like something was starting to press in on him. Then came the first crack. 3 days before rent was due. Mason was in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. I told you I'd figure it out, he said, voice low but strained. Pause. No, I can't move it again. Another pause. I said I'll handle it. He hung up and turned around and saw me standing in the doorway. How long were you there? He asked. Long enough. He forced a smile. Just work stuff. I nodded. Of course. But this time he didn't look relieved, because now he didn't know how much I knew. That night I checked the shared folder again. There was a new update. Vanessa's studio lease draft. Signed. Dated 2 days ago. My chest didn't tighten this time, because now it all made sense. The urgency, the transfers, the tension. Mason wasn't just helping her anymore. He had committed, with money he didn't actually have. The collapse didn't happen in one moment. It started the morning rent was due. I paid my half, nothing more. By noon, Mason had sent 3 messages. Did something go wrong? The payment didn't go through. Clara? I didn't answer. At 2 p.m., he called. I declined. At 4 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Mason. It was the landlord. I picked up. Hi, Clara. Just checking. Rent's partially received. Everything okay? Yes, I said. My portion is paid. The rest should come from Mason. A pause. Oh, I see. Professional tone, but I knew what that meant. A note on the account, a shift in responsibility, no more couple, just 2 names, separate. By the time I got home, Mason was already there, waiting, again. But this time he wasn't composed. What did you do? He demanded. I paid my rent. You know what I mean. I set my bag down slowly. I said I wouldn't cover you anymore. You didn't think to warn me? I did. That wasn't a warning, Clara. That was the truth. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. You can't just pull support like that. I can when it's mine. You're trying to make a point. No, I said. I already made it. He stopped, looked at me. Really looked this time. And for the first time, he saw something he didn't recognize. Not anger, distance. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Vanessa. He hesitated, just for a second, then answered. Hey. Pause. No, not yet. Another pause. I told you I'm handling it. His voice was lower now, tense. I watched him. Not because I cared what he said, because I wanted to see who he chose when pressure hit. Vanessa's voice was faint through the speaker, sharp, urgent. Mason turned away from me. I said I've got it, okay? That told me everything. He hung up and turned back. "This isn't just about me," he said. I tilted my head slightly. "I know." He stepped closer. "You're affecting other people now." There it was. Not guilt, not apology, responsibility, redirected. I nodded once. "Good." His expression broke. "What does that mean?" "It means the truth is finally reaching the right places." He stared at me, confused, then wary. "What did you do?" I picked up my phone, opened my email, and showed him 3 sent messages, one to the landlord, one to a financial advisor, and one to his mother. Subject line, "Just so everything is clear." His face went pale. "You sent my mom something?" "Yes." "What did you send?" I met his eyes. Everything. The transfers, the documents, the timeline, the recording from dinner, the studio plan with Vanessa's name sitting right on top of money Mason could never explain. Not accusations, facts, clean, undeniable. His phone started ringing again. Not Vanessa this time, his mother. He didn't pick up. It rang again and again. Then a message came through. He read it. His jaw tightened. "What did she say?" I asked. He didn't answer, but I saw the screen before he turned it away. "Mason, tell me this isn't true. Did Clara's money go into Vanessa's studio?" That was when the collapse became real. Not screaming, not chaos. Just the first person in his own family looking at him differently. The version of Mason that everyone believed in was breaking right in front of me. I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" he asked. I paused, not turning back, off the track. And this time, I didn't wait for him to understand. I didn't go far that night, just far enough. A hotel a few blocks away. Clean, quiet, temporary. The kind of place you stay when you don't need comfort. You need distance. I checked in, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time in days, there was no tension in the air, no waiting, no watching, no calculating what version of the truth I was being given. Just silence. My phone buzzed. Mason. I let it ring. Then a message. "Clara, we need to talk." Another one. This got out of hand. I stared at the screen for a second, then locked it. Because that was the difference now. Before, I would have answered. Before, I would have tried to fix it. Before, I would have believed we meant something. Now I understood. There was no we. There was only timing. And he had run out of it. The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I couldn't sleep, because my mind felt light. That was the strange part. No anger, no sadness. Just relief, like something heavy had been removed without me realizing how much I had been carrying. I ordered coffee, opened my laptop, and finished the last steps, removed my card from every shared account, transferred my remaining balance, saved copies of every document, then I sent one final email. To the landlord. Short. Direct. My portion is paid through the current billing cycle. Please document that Mason will be responsible for his remaining balance moving forward. I read it once, sent it, closed the laptop. Done. Around noon, my phone rang again. This time I picked up. Mason didn't waste time. "Clara, what are you doing?" "Moving on." "This is insane." "No, this is late." A pause. "You blindsided me." I almost smiled. "I warned you." "That wasn't a real warning. It was the only one you were going to get." He exhaled sharply. "You're overreacting. It was money, Clara. I was helping someone. With money you didn't have. I was going to pay it back." "When?" Silence. I let it sit there, heavy, unavoidable. Then he said, quieter now, "You didn't have to do it like this." "Yes," I said. "I did." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, less confident, less controlled. "I made mistakes," he said. "I can fix this." "No, you can't." "You don't even want to try?" I looked out the window. People moving on the street below, normal life, uninterrupted. I already tried, I said. You just didn't notice. That hit him. I could hear it in the silence that followed. Then he said something I had been waiting for. I didn't think you'd leave. And there it was, the truth. Not about Vanessa, not about the money, about me. I wasn't supposed to leave. I was supposed to adjust, to forgive, to stay, to be the one on the sidetrack. I know, I said quietly. Another silence. Then, Vanessa doesn't matter, he said quickly. This isn't about her. It never was. Then what is it about? I didn't answer immediately, because the answer wasn't complicated, it was just final. It's about the fact that you already chose, I said. What do you mean? You chose what mattered to you. That's not fair. It is, I said, cutting him off gently. You just don't like how it looks now. He didn't argue after that, because there was nothing left to argue with. We didn't have a dramatic ending. No yelling, no apologies that changed anything. Just a conversation that ran out of reasons to continue. Before hanging up, he said one last thing. Clara, I didn't think you were like this. I held the phone in my hand, steady. You're right, I said. I wasn't. And then I ended the call. A few days later, I went back to the apartment, not to stay, to finish. Mason wasn't there. The place felt different. Empty, but not sad, just neutral. I packed what was mine. Clothes, documents, small things that mattered. Left everything else exactly where it was. No notes, no messages, nothing for him to reinterpret later. As I stood by the door, ready to leave for the last time, my phone buzzed again. A message from his mother. I didn't know. I'm sorry. A second message followed. He told us you were controlling. He never said you were paying for all of this. I read both once, then locked my phone. Because some apologies don't change anything. They just arrive too late. On my way out, I paused for a second, not because I was unsure, because I remembered the question, the one that started everything. 5 people on one track, one person on the other. Turn the wheel, don't turn the wheel. For a long time, I thought the hardest part was choosing. Now I understood. The hardest part was realizing you were never supposed to stay on the track at all. I opened the door, stepped outside, and this time, I didn't look back.